Good morning and welcome to the March 22nd, 2022 Board of Supervisors. At this time, we will be going into closed session, and we have 3 items. If the clerk could please call them off, and then we'll ask for public comment.
Closed session for today, March 22nd. Item 1, pursuant to Government Code 54657B1, Public Employment, Title, Planning Director. Item 2, pursuant to Government Code 54657B1, Public Employee Performance Evaluation, Title, County Council. Item 3, pursuant to Government Code 54657B1, Public Employee Performance Evaluation, Title, County Administrative Officer.
Thank you. Is there any public comment?
There is no online public comment.
And there's no one in the room. With that, we'll convene into closed session and be back at 9. Good morning and welcome to the Tuesday, March 22nd, 2022 Board of Supervisors meeting. If you could please stand for the pledge. Pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Earlier this morning, we were in closed session, and we will be continuing closed session after the regular board meeting and reporting out at the next board meeting date. With that, we have staff announcements. Lisa Medina.
Good morning, Madam Chair, respective board members, Calaveras County Community, our Deputy Clerk of the Board, CEO Von Lada, Lisa Medina, Environmental Management Agency. So we had a very successful rabies clinic, and we want to make sure our next clinic that is going to be coming up on Saturday, April 9th from 9 to noon here at the Government Center is another success. We would like to see all of our Calaveras community animals vaccinated against rabies and also microchips, so if they do get lost, they can find their way home. So we will be having our attending veterinarian, Dr. Jenny Ringett, be attending that particular event, and we would like to see everybody again out at that event on Saturday, April 9th from 9 to noon. Thank you very much. Have a great day, everybody.
Thank you. Is there any other staff announcements?
There is no other staff announcements.
Okay. With that, we will move on to recognitions and acknowledgement. We have item number 4. Clerk.
Proclamation brought by Health and Human Service Agency. Adopt a proclamation declaring the month of April 2022 Child Abuse Prevention Be the One month in Calaveras County.
Good morning, Madam Chair, members of the board. Corey Allen, Health and Human Services Agency. With me today, we have a team of local community collaborators, staff, and general public interested in making sure that we continually move forward an effort on prevention of child abuse. But obviously it's March, and Child Abuse Prevention Month comes in April. So we are setting the stage for so many activities and ideas, but the person speaking to you today will be Robin Davis.
Good morning. I'm Robin Davis, Program Coordinator with First 5 Calaveras. We're part of Health and Human Services Agency. And with me today are members of Prevent Child Abuse Calaveras, volunteers, and our partners. So April is Child Abuse Prevention Month. We want to share with you a little bit about the Be the One campaign and the Light of Hope annual ceremony that we'll do. But the first thing that we wanted to do was acknowledge that that March is Social Worker Appreciation Month. So many of us work closely with social workers, and they have a wide capacity of things that they do. But we really just want to thank them. We honor and respect the work that they do. Today you'll be hearing from Maggie Rawlings and from Holly Stetson. They are both, they volunteer their time to support children and also to create a trauma-informed community. And then Farrah Roberts is the chair of our Family Wellness Coalition, and she's going to give you a preview of some of the things that we've been working on this year to kind of look at the state of families in Calaveras County that we'll be bringing to you next time. Prevent Child Abuse Calaveras has a vision to, our vision is that every child should be safe, protected, and loved. And our mission is to improve the well-being of all families in our community through safe and healthy relationships within homes, schools, and communities. So we prevent child abuse when families are supported and connected, and when all children, every child, has at least one adult that they can rely on for unconditional support and care. And with this proclamation, we have a nomination form for the Light of Hope. It's going to be held virtually on April 20th. We hope that you can join us and be inspired by all the people in our community who give hope to children.
Thank you. Is there anyone else? Corey? No?
Good morning. Thank you for this time this morning to support April as the Child Abuse Prevention Month. And I'm Maggie Rawlings, and I have been in this on the Child Abuse Prevention Board for Council for a number of years, and I also thank you for that because you appoint me. I just wanted to say that Be the One and this nomination opportunity for people is so important. It acknowledges and it encourages others to do the same, so we lead by example. We're also, as part of this campaign, starting small and just going around and thanking people and encouraging them to be an advocate as well. This is Holly Stetson, and she has done that through her experience with raising her family and for participating whenever she can. I also do the work with the parent education that First Five provides, which is so important. It actually gives parents an opportunity to find out more, self-educate, do better for themselves, and then they again are encouraging to other parents. And Holly has joined my workshops to be the face to the real experience, and she's done that for the trauma-informed conferences, especially the initial one in 2020. She was on as video clips about raising her family, and I just wanted to give her an opportunity to talk about this too.
Thank you, Maggie. Thank you for letting me share today. My son's life has been transformed because of people who choose and continue to choose to be the one. When we got foster placement of my son, Ethan, at 4 years of age, the trauma that he experienced and was still experiencing disrupted his sense of self and that feeling of belonging to a community. By his unpredictable environment and constant change in caregivers, he was made to feel like he didn't belong anywhere and didn't matter to anyone. Children that experience adverse childhood experiences without a positive adult in their lives learn that they matter less. But every Sunday at church, my son would make sure to bring a cup of coffee to the person with a disability so they didn't have to manage juggling a cane and hot coffee. It gave my son a sense of usefulness, which was nice, but beyond that, that person always had a smile and a loud greeting that made Ethan feel wanted and seen, thought about, and cared for. That is being the one. My son has difficulties in a traditional classroom setting, going as far as to hide under his desk, among other things, to avoid classroom demands. But he has thrived in his special education program because of the amazing educators in our county. Beyond that, he had a teacher that got on the floor with him and met him where he was at. That is being the one. Before and after school every day, one of the bus drivers that works with him talks to him about how his day is going and encourages him when he's having a hard time. Beyond that, she spends her own personal time to come cheer him on at his basketball and baseball games. That helps him feel like he matters. That is being the one. My dear friend has 3 boys that Ethan loves to play with. She opens her home and treats Ethan like he is one of her own and makes sure that he knows that he is loved and cared for in her home. Beyond that, she is teaching her sons to include children that have differences, teaching her sons to help and care for others. That is being the one and raising young men that will be the one for children in their communities. My son has made a lot of progress academically, socially, but especially emotionally. Good school settings and therapy help, but if it were not for the inner wealth he is building by having meaningful connections with the adults in his life, he would not be progressing like he is. Children need positive adult interactions to help them feel connected and valued. Children need people to be the one in their lives. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning. I'm Farrah Roberts. I'm the program manager of the Court Appointed Special Advocates Program, and I've sat with the Prevent Child Abuse Calaveras on the council for, this is my 3rd term. And I have been part of this community practically my whole life. And seeing children growing up around me and along with my children, child abuse prevention has just been one of the most important things for me to champion. And I'm sure that you guys are aware, but the cost of child abuse and maltreatment is exorbitant. In California, $23.9 billion is the cost each year for children in child abuse maltreatment. And that is because it funnels into the cost of child welfare, education, the criminal justice system. So that cost would equal about 2 million children going to preschool every year. So what does that translate to Calaveras County? $35 million in 2020. That would equal 3,000 children going to preschool in Calaveras County. And if you think about how many children are in the education system, that probably would cover almost every single little child under the age of 5. So we were tasked recently by the Office of Child Abuse Prevention and Department of Social Services to look at that cost figure and figure out how to move that funding upstream, get it to the primary prevention level. So to give you an example of what primary prevention is, I do the Court Appointed Special Advocates Program. We train volunteers to mentor children in the foster care system. So that's the tertiary level, after the crisis has happened. A secondary prevention would be like the mentoring program, who works and has adults work with children who are kind of having some trouble, but are not quite in the foster care system. Primary prevention would be looking at having youth centers where hundreds of kids could come in, get some help, and then potentially prevent child abuse. So we were tasked by, under this Family Wellness Coalition, now a subcommittee of the Prevent Child Abuse Council, to look deep into the data. So for the last 4 years, we've been combing through every little piece of data using the social determinants of health. So that's looking at economics, the community, neighborhood, health outcomes. And what we're finding is that we have big city problems. Our child abuse numbers still rival those in big cities. But what we have are rural community problems, which is isolation, lack of healthcare providers, things that you guys are probably completely aware of. So how are we going to move that needle forward? So we also looked at all of the assets that we have in our community. What is currently here in helping children? I have some positive things to tell you. We have some of the top graduation rates in the state. So children graduating from high school are doing pretty well. Where we have lacked some are providing mental health services to the families across the board. Now, I had intended to present to you like a whole State of the Children presentation, but I will bring that to you at a later date. But I want to invite you guys to kind of explore this conversation with us. We are already in our 5th year of examining the data, and we would like to present the whole thing to you soon. But this is a long-term commitment. The people who are on this committee are here to stay. We are working on having a strategic plan to make sure people are here to replace us as we go on and move on, because this prevention piece is long-lasting. It's collaborative. It takes everybody to be at the seat. We have a great team already established. We have behavioral health involved. We have many of the community non-NGOs involved. But the next step is to looking at how can we now start supporting programs that are already in place and filling the holes where that need to be filled. So thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I'm going to read the proclamation. Oh, hi, Marty.
Is this where you're welcoming community to speak on this?
Yeah.
Marty Crane. Years ago, for quite a few years, I served on the Calaveras Prevent Child Abuse Council. Back in the day when there was no money to really do the work, get the word out, that sort of thing. So when you talk about being the one, there are many things that you can do. If you don't have access to being in front of a child that needs help, you can work in the background. You all work in the background to support the efforts and the work that's being done. I don't remember when it was, but I do remember vividly the very first day that Robin came to work. And I have to say that where we are today is a direct result of the people that came before her and her efforts and the team that they have built. So big applause for everyone. I also want to say thank you to our court system and for all the people that made a phone call and said, I'm concerned about this. I heard about a thing called court-appointed advocates. Why don't we have that here in Calaveras? And if you make that phone call before when we didn't have a court-appointed advocate system, and you keep making it, eventually people start to remember and they hear something else, and before you know it, you're getting traction. So thank you for the efforts that are being done through the courts, you may know that I serve as a trustee on the Calaveras County School Board, where we are highly involved and supportive of pushing efforts to support our foster children. We were really worried about what was happening when they would age out, so been addressing that for a number of years now, and so it thrills me to go to a school board meeting and hear about this, because we get to hear about it every month. And so applause to everyone who wants to be the one, and know that there are many ways that you can be the one every day. So applause. Thank you. Thank you all.
Thank you, Marty. All right. Proclaiming the month of April 2022 as Child Abuse Prevention Be the One Month in Calaveras County. Whereas, based on research, the Be the One campaign can build community resilience one family at a time. And whereas all members of the community have a role to play in strengthening families to ensure children grow up safe, protected, and loved. And whereas Calaveras County agencies, schools, and organizations are working to bring attention to long-term impacts of toxic stress and to implement trauma-informed strategies to support families. And whereas families are strengthened through positive relationships, resiliency tools, knowledge of children development, and concrete support such as income, shelter, food, and childcare. Whereas child abuse is preventable when children have at least one caring, supportive adult in their life who believes in their potential and provides unconditional support and care. Whereas caring relationships have the power to build resilience, inspire, comfort, and transform us, and we have the power to be one today. Now I will bring it to the board. Is there a motion and a second?
Madam Chair,
Yes.
if I can make a quick
Oh, yes.
statement as
Yep.
well. I just wanted to thank, for the 5 years that I've served on this board, it has been a pleasure and a real honor to watch the work that you do. The work that Robin, Farah, Terry do, our social workers, is sometimes not seen, but it is constant, and it is so important to the future. And I just want you to know how much I admire that you guys just keep putting one foot in front of another, day after day, dealing with very difficult situations and really making our community better. And I admire it greatly. So thank you very much. And I'll make a motion.
I'll second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Now therefore be proclaimed that the Board of Supervisors County of Calaveras, the 22nd day of March 2022, dedicated by the Clerk, April 2022, as be the 1 month in Calaveras County.
I'm sorry, and I just have some lapel pins for you.
Actually, I want you to come in and pick
Oh,
up
okay, okay.
Supervisor Ball.
There it is.
One, two, three, again, and one more. Perfect. Thank you.
You're welcome, thank you.
When you retire. Yeah, I will.
See? But hers you can't hear.
Oh, nice.
You gonna be able to read that?
Okay, cut. Okay.
Is that better? Okay.
Yeah.
Gotta hit it in the right spot.
That better? Okay, there we go. Okay. Thank you, everyone. Now we will move on to the number 5. We have the next proclamation. Marita. You want the clerk to read it out first, please?
I'll do it, that's fine. Do you want to do it? I'll do it. Okay. We're going to be doing a proclamation supporting and standing in. I'll get through it. Solidarity with Ukraine. Oh my gosh. Yeah, I am emotional about this. My grandmother's from Kyiv. I have family in the Ukraine, so. Anyway, is there any public comment on this item before I proceed?
I'm so proud of you folks for taking this action. I have ribbons with Ukraine colors for all of y'all back there. Thank you. Like I said, I'm real proud of y'all. Sometimes we think you're all out of touch with what's really going on because, you know, you're up there and we're out here. But I take a lot of pride in the stand you've taken to show support for maybe one of the last hopes in that area of the world for retaining some form of democracy and civilization. So thank you again. Thanks, Marita.
Is there any other public comment?
I'd like to ditto Bonnie's comment that we're so very proud of our county leadership in taking the leadership to do this. They always say politics is local. Everything is local. Our children, everything we do for our children is local, but it expands out from there all over the world. So we've all witnessed what's been going on, and I'm just, with you, Marita, it's hard to choke back the tears. You almost have to limit your news watching in order for your own mental psyche, you know. So thank you all for that. And I don't have direct family in Ukraine or in Europe, but I've always felt like because I don't have children in the school system, they're all my kids. I don't have children at home. Everybody's kids are my kids and my responsibility. So I feel like all those families, all those children, they're mine. So bless you. Keep up the good work. Continue to be the one. Thank you.
Are there any online comments, Clerk?
There is no online public comment.
Okay, thank you. Madam Chair, thank you for this privilege. I'm not sure I can do this. Just bear with me. You know, I cry at Hallmark commercials too. Okay, the Ukraine has been a sovereign and independent state since August 24, 1991, upon its withdrawal from the collapsing former Soviet Union, whereas the Ukraine adopted its constitution in 1996 and is home to 44 million citizens led by a popular elected president. And whereas the United States and Ukraine share common values, including freedom, democracy, and the rule of law. Whereas on February 24, 2022, the Russian Federation launched a brutal, unprovoked act of war by undertaking a full-scale invasion of the Ukraine. Whereas the attack has been condemned throughout the world by international stakeholders. Whereas this power grab by the Russian Federation has resulted in the deaths of hundreds, now thousands, of innocent civilians, has destroyed essential infrastructure, violates international norms and laws and human rights, and poses a threat to democracy. Whereas the County of Calaveras joins the international community in condemning this violence and honoring those who fight for freedom and an independent Ukraine. Could you take over? So, thank you. Would you stop?
With that, I bring it to the board. Is there a motion and a second?
So moved, Madam Chair.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay.
I want to thank my colleagues for doing this.
All in favor?
Aye.
Now therefore be it proclaimed that the Calaveras County Board of Supervisors hereby proclaims its support for and solidarity with the people of Ukraine in their fight for freedom, commend them for their strength, encourage and urges all of our citizens to support those fighting for democracy and freedom throughout the conflict. Thank you, Marita.
I think that maybe Chair Follendorf, I think maybe that Chair Follendorf didn't get one. So, thank you. Thank you.
We will now move on to general public comment. Any item of the interest to the public that is within the subject matter jurisdiction of the board and is not posted on the consent or regular agenda may be addressed during the public comment period. Is there any public comment?
Good morning. Bonnie Newman from Double Springs. Following up, Gary, with your suggestion, I have a petition signed by the residents of Double Springs. Unfortunately, some are on vacation and one's in a rest home, so it's not as extensive as I had thought. Would you like that now, or should I hold on to it?
Why don't you hang on to it and then I'll get it from you.
Okay.
Or tell you what, just give it to me now.
Okay. Well, it's here.
Did you make a copy of it?
Yeah, I have a copy, because I didn't know everyone's phone number. Thank you. The second thing, you know, I have a tendency to come and bitch a lot, you know, complain about something. I try not to do it without having a thought through a solution of some kind. And about 3 or 4 years ago, I was sitting in here, and the fire chiefs were sitting behind me, and they were talking among themselves, and they were talking about the litter and how they should sponsor a litter cleanup. And I thought, oh, what a great idea. Maybe they could get the Board of Supervisors and the fire districts all on board to do litter cleanup. And I don't just mean along the road, I mean from the road to the fence line. Because I'm telling you, when I drive from Valley Springs to San Andreas, it looks really bad, especially the Brisky grade right there. That's all trashed up. And I drove to Angels Camp, pretty much the same thing. I go to Jackson, and we got to do something about the litter. We got to keep Calaveras clean. I'm suggesting maybe 4 times a year with every season, sponsor a countywide litter cleanup where we could look good, because we're looking kind of shabby. And I can only do so much on my little road, but if somebody knows the police chiefs, there was someone over there that had a really good idea about 3 or 4 years ago, and I'd suggest if you got an in, maybe we could sponsor a whole campaign. And you could take credit for it.
Thank you. Is there any other public comment in the room? Is there any comment on Zoom?
There is no online public comment.
Okay. Okay, with that, well, before we move on to consent agenda, I need to recognize someone in the room here. We got Brent, a former planning director, CAO interim, and even landscaper. Thanks for being here today. Okay, we'll move on to consent agenda. Consent agenda items are expected to be routine and non-controversial. They will be acted upon by the board at one time without discussion. Any board member, staff member, or interested party may request the removal of an item from the consent for later discussion. Is there any board member that wishes to pull an item from consent? Seeing none, is there any staff? Nope. Is there any public comment? Nope. Okay, with that,
Well, we went dark. No.
okay. Okay. With that, is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
I'll move this item, Madam Chair.
Is there a second?
Second, Madam Chair.
All in favor?
Aye.
5-0. Did you get those? Okay.
All we had to do is say aye and you're leaving, Brent.
I was told everybody, if you don't get to speak, don't speak. Thank you.
Aye.
Wise words. Okay, next we will move on.
I can't abide by it.
Next we will move on to the regular agenda, and we have item number 17. Clerk?
Item 17, resolution, County Council. 1, by a roll call vote, adopt and amend resolution to apply and accept the California Department of Parks and Recreation Proposition 68 per capita grant allocations in the amount of $400,000. 2, pre-approve state's proposed grant contract terms. 3, approve and authorize the Director of Economic and Community Development to administer the grant and sign and submit all required documents on its behalf. And 4, establish the Proposition 68 per capita grant reimbursement local program for a period ending June 30th, 2024.
It says you're on the...
That's fine, yeah, so the item did technically come from me. I put it in there, and I think Ms. Glino may want to speak as well. This is basically just a cleanup. The board previously passed or adopted this resolution. The prior version authorized the Department of Economic and Community Development to administer the grant, and the state would like that changed from department to director so that they can move forward. So this is cleaning up, changing that one word.
Okay. Ms. Galino?
Good morning, Tara Follendorf and board. Yes, I received word back that we were approved for the grants, for the Prop 68 grants. However, they would prefer the word director put in rather than department. So they're asking for this change to the resolution.
Okay. Is there any board Supervisor Calloway?
Oh, no.
Oh, okay. Is there any board comment, or is there any public comment?
There's no online public comment.
Okay, and there's no one in the room. With that, I'll bring it back to the board. It is a roll call vote, so I will need a motion, a second, and then we will go down the line.
Jack, you want to make the motion?
So moved. As amended.
I'll second.
Okay, roll call vote. Supervisor Calloway?
Aye.
Supervisor Garamendi?
Aye.
Vice Chair Topanelli?
Aye.
Supervisor Stopper?
Aye.
And myself, aye. That's 5-0.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Next is item number 18. Clerk?
Item 18, resolution, Human Resources, adopt a resolution authorizing changes to the position control list for fiscal year 2021-2022, mid-year budget changes, and approve new job descriptions.
Ms. Hawkins. There you go. Hi.
Good morning. Sorry about that. Good morning, Madam Chair, members of the board. I am bringing before you the resolution memorializing the personnel changes that were approved at the mid-year budget hearing held on March 8th. And then also I am requesting the addition of 3 new classifications, and they are Vote Center Clerk, Vote Center Lead, and LVN. The addition of these positions do not create FTEs. These are classifications. The vote center positions are used strictly for extra hires who are working in our vote centers and assisting with the election process. And these are temporary employees. And then the addition of the classification of LVN. The purpose of this request is we have a very difficult time filling nursing positions. That is not just our county, that is nationwide. And so this will allow us to have somebody that can still provide the medication support services to behavioral health. Can I answer any questions?
Is there any board questions or comments? Seeing none, is there any public comment?
There is no online public comment.
Okay, and seeing there's none in the room, I'll bring it back to the board. Is there a motion to approve? In a second.
So moved.
Moved by Supervisor. Moved by Supervisor Callaway, second by Toffenelli. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you,
Thank
Judy.
you. Thank you.
Next, we have item number 19. This is an informational item. OES. Clerk?
Item 19, informational item, OES, receive a presentation regarding the 2017 through 2019 winter storms disaster recovery update.
Mr. Osborne.
Good morning, Madam Chair, board members. John Osborne, your Director of Emergency Services. I'd like to share a screen now and walk you through an update of our disaster recovery in relation to the 2017 and the 2019 winter storms. Everybody see the screen there, okay?
Yes.
Okay. So our last update to the board was last summer. And what I'd like to do is just remind of some of the acronyms that I'm prone to use. DR is the Federal Disaster Declaration Number. Project Workbook, or PW, is the individual projects as they are numbered and how we track them. And then there are 2 types of projects, a small project and a large project. The small projects are set to a dollar amount, and as we move through the presentation today, at the bottom of each individual data report, you'll see the limit for small versus large. Primarily, the difference between the 2 is large projects are closed out individually upon completion, and the small projects in a given data report are closed out as a group. And then last, there is a project that involves the Federal Highway Administration, and that's FHWA. I would like to recognize some of our partners that are on the call with us this morning from Public Works, our director, Mr. Patchinger, Kelly Zanheiser, and Mark Kinslack. And they'll be along to answer some of the more technical questions that you guys may have. So just a brief overview of the workflow. You'll see the project work up here, and the project work is owned and managed administratively and from a project standpoint by a county department or a contractor. Almost all of the projects in the 17 winter storms and the 19 winter storms were conducted by Public Works, save one that was conducted by facilities, and that was our museum downtown. So what happens is once the project work is completed, the administrative section as well as the guys out in the field rebuilding what was damaged, once that's done, the financial documents are prepared by that department and provided to OES. Depending on whether it's a large or small project, if it's a large project, we complete the closeout and send it to Cal OES. Cal OES does a crosswalk of the project, and once it meets their approval, it goes to FEMA. If it's a small project, then the small projects are grouped together until all of them are completed, and then we submit one closeout for all of the projects to Cal OES. The same crosswalk is completed by Cal OES, and then it's submitted to FEMA. So again, the closeout flow goes from the department level to our shop, to Cal OES, and FEMA. And as each Cal OES and FEMA, as they do their crosswalks and examine the packages, they respond back to the agency below them. So if it's FEMA, they respond back to Cal OES, who responds back to County OES, who goes back to the project manager and finds out whatever piece of information that they may be looking for. And then we send it back up. So it follows this ladder up and down as it moves through the closeout process. So our first 17 winter storms, it's 4301. On the 18th of January 2017, the Board of Supervisors proclaimed a disaster for all of these reasons. As a result of that declaration and FEMA or the President declaring a disaster, we had 10 projects that were created. 6 of them were small, 2 of them are large. That are remaining. These 6 small projects are going to claim out about $172,410. Now that is the claimed amount, and I tried to make this as simple to present as possible, but it's inherently complicated. That means what that claimed amount means, that's how much we're going to ask for reimbursement. That doesn't mean that that's going to be what FEMA grants us or what we end up with as a reimbursement number. So, and then the small project threshold for this particular disaster was $123,500. And later in the presentation, I'll show you a breakdown, a spreadsheet that denotes where we stand with each project. So with 4301, we have 2 projects that are left. That's the Blagan Road project, both the emergency protective measures and the final permanent work. The board will be seeing a project completion later provided by Public Works in the future. They're almost completed and ready to come to you guys and ask for the certificate of completion. So that'll be here shortly, and then we'll close out those last 2 remaining larges. The second winter storms, February of 2017, it lasted into February 1, almost the whole month. It resulted in 10 public project workbooks. 6 of them are small and are ready to be closed out, and 2 large projects are closed to the tune of $2.05 million claimed to FEMA. This project had the same small, large project threshold of $123,500. Moving to the 19 storms. Let me back up one, I'm sorry. One of the things that is unique about 4308 is on August 30th of last year, Cal OES did what they call a compliance assessment on this data report. And what a compliance assessment is it's a desk compliance assessment on our subaward. The assessment includes examining selected documentation that supported our expenditures and performing certain procedures as necessary to determine compliance with the Code of Federal Regulations and grant guidelines. OES conducted the compliance assessment and did not identify any instances of non-compliance as a result. So that's kind of a quick look at that particular data report to make sure that we're moving in the right direction with our documentation and with our submittals. So positive note there that we're moving in the right direction with what we're submitting to them. Our 19 winter storms, it was February of 19, very similar storm as the 17 storms. It resulted in 6 project workbooks, 4 small project workbooks that were completed by Public Works, 1 that was completed by Facilities, and 1 large project workbook that was canceled by Public Works. And essentially we were able to repair that damage in an extremely cost-efficient manner that didn't necessitate us having a large project. The large project, small project threshold was $128,900 on this particular project, or on this particular data report, excuse me. Okay, so here's a spreadsheet that denotes each and every project that we currently have. You'll see the data report number, the project workbook number, the project name, the status, whether it's large or small, the approved project amount, the claim or anticipated claim amount, the approved claimed difference, the federal share, the state received, and the combined of that, and then our local share. So you'll see as we move through these, there are a lot of projects that are closed out. Here's Blagan Road, the permanent, and the EPM. And what you'll notice here is there are, with the large projects, oftentimes there is an amount above the approved, the FEMA approved amount. And that is actually routine. With the exception of capped projects, which none of these are, the final eligible amount for a large project is the actual documented cost incurred to complete the eligible scope of work. So while those are demonstrated in red, and on its face it looks like we're going over what we're approved for, that's actually contained in the CFRs, that the final amount is how much we actually spent. So you see these red, that's what that indicates. And then you'll see some open projects here. These are small projects that we will close out in one bundle. And so essentially we are left with 2 large projects and submitting closeouts for a handful, maybe a few more of the small projects in 4308. So at the bottom here, we're going to claim somewhere in the neighborhood of $5.9 million in our expenditures. We have received a total of about $963,000, and so we have a balance of about $4.9 million. As we move through these, again, with each project and each data report, Cal OES does a crosswalk and they can approve or disapprove down to the invoice level, whether or not it's within the scope of work, and then there's an appeal process behind that follows on behind that. So there's a lot of process that goes through between us, Cal OES, and FEMA as these projects get closed out. And so the important thing to see here is that these numbers are ultimately estimations unless it is a closed out project, and then that's the actual amount that we've closed them out. And because of that process, these numbers are somewhat soft and hard to target and say it's going to be this exact amount because we haven't completed that process with any of these individual project workbooks. Lastly, much like the process itself, there are a lot of people that are involved in this, and these are the folks that work with this every day and are working hard to close these disasters out. Just a big thanks to our CAO staff, admin office staff, our OES staff, and our public works staff. These are our public works folks are the ones that are actually out doing these projects and restoring the damage from these storms back to pre-disaster standards. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Are there any board questions or comments? Supervisor Callaway.
Mr. Osborne, I'm just taking one as an example on debris removal towards the very end, 4431, the DR 4431. The amount that was approved was 118. We claimed 102, but the actual was 612,000. What am I missing here? That if our actual was 6, we only claim 1.2?
So that is a small project, and small projects are considered together. So all of the small projects there, if we do not have a cost overrun, we are just granted that amount. That particular project 111, we are going to amend the amount claimed and claim the full amount. Because we are over the limit of 118,551, it will automatically be denied, and we'll have to move through that appeals process with Cal OES and FEMA. And one of the things that allows us to change a small project is that we request additional funds. And it's my understanding that as we moved through that particular project 111, we notified Cal OES that we were likely or had exceeded that amount. And so that'll be our point for the appeal, is to show that we did notify Cal OES that we were over the amount. And so we should be able to claim the full amount.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other board questions or comments? Okay, is there any public comment?
There is no online public comment.
Okay. Bring it back to the board.
I do have one question, going back to 4431 and item 178, the permanent road repairs. It says project canceled. We canceled a project that would repair any of the existing roads, permanent roads that might have got damaged during the storm due to rock slides or what have you.
Yes, sir. 178, it was a very low traffic count road, and it's my understanding that Public Works was able to repair the road sufficiently with what we had, so that we didn't need to do the project itself.
On some of these projects that are closed out and we have billed FEMA, I see the dates on here that they were closed out. There's no date that we billed FEMA. Do we have any idea when we're going to start receiving? Because we're what, $5 million still waiting? And that most of that money came out of RIM fees account. Is there any time frame that we know we're going to be able to repay that money into the RIM fees? Because there's a couple of projects that are hung on that RIM fee amount. One of them is Wagon Trail that we've committed money to, and that fund is down, and we're started this project. So my concerns are being able to have the money available when needed for this first phase of the Wagon Trail.
I share those concerns as well. I can completely identify with that concern. And unfortunately, that's the one answer that is difficult to give. We have been vigorous in our collection of the closeout packages. We have worked closely with Calaveras to make sure that they are sufficient to get the maximum amount of reimbursement. The one thing that none of us can control is what FEMA does and when FEMA gets to reviewing the actual closeout packages. I've seen some fairly fast turnarounds with our Butte fire recovery in the number of 6 to 12 months. But I've also seen where it's 2 to 7 years, depending on FEMA. Obviously, we're one small county across the entire nation that is getting in line with FEMA to get reimbursement. And unfortunately, I don't have a solid timeline that I can provide you, sir.
Thank you.
Are there any other board comments or questions? I have a couple, but I want to make sure my colleagues. Okay. John, I don't know if this is a question for you, but rather possibly admin or public works. And I might just need an education because I'm the newest member on the board. For RIM fees, understanding that these are road projects and they fall under public works, how is it that RIM was decided to use for these funding, knowing that there were going to be future projects on the horizon? And it goes back to what Gary just commented or stated. I am just out of curiosity.
I can take that, John, if you don't mind.
Absolutely. Go ahead, ma'am. Thank you.
So that happened back when a couple of things were going on, and anybody else on this call who wants to jump in I invite to do so. But when we were going through budget development a couple of years ago, the administrative office made the recommendation to strip out 100% of what were then anticipated Butte fire recovery, separate from these projects, but revenues. And at that time, when we had the conversation with the board, the recommendation was made to backstop, because at that point we were removing a very large sum of revenue from our budget on the basis that we did not reasonably know when those funds were going to come in. We are in a similar position now with these projects. So what we did at that time was determine to make loans from REM to the general fund in order to cover getting these projects done. And then once we, you know, a large part of the conversation or the justification for bringing this item, which we will continue to bring back on a quarterly basis to keep you updated in terms of what funds have come in and whatnot. But the idea was to to basically free up cash flow in the general fund, and that once we get these projects to a point where OES is notified by either Calaveras or FEMA that we can, or that in whatever way that we can book back those revenues, then we will do so. And that will offset our need for a REM loan. So yeah, we're very well aware, but that is the history there to the extent I recall it.
Are we even allowed to do that with road fund?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Well, going outside of the wagon trail and going forward, I'm concerned that this is going to become an excuse of why we're not able to do other road projects.
I defer to Public Works here, but my understanding is that that is not an issue that they're anticipating at this time.
Yes. Good morning. I'm here with Mark and Kelly. We're in agreement with what the CAO just explained in regards to future projects out of the RIM list of projects. Right now, as you know, the Wagon Trail is the project that we're working on. We don't anticipate delivering any of the other projects within that list in the near future, so we're okay for now.
Okay. Thank you, Robert.
Thank you.
I know we don't have an anticipated time, John, but what is the next, if we don't get this full funding, what's the next step? Reimburse?
So our next steps
I mean, what's going to backfill the RIM fund?
I mean, this is a general fund obligation, whether there's a REM loan for it or not. So at the end of the day, if the general fund needs to repay these loans, then we will bring those recommendations to you during our budget process.
Okay.
We will be also just, for the sake of process, one of the things that the administrative office, the auditor controller's office, OES, and Public Works will be working on during budget is figuring out exactly what loans are anticipated to be made or recommended to your board in order to close the books for this current fiscal year. So that will be a determination that ultimately the board has to pass on or approve when we're at that time.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other questions or comments at this time? Okay, I'm not seeing anything. And I'm just going to do a double check. Is there any public comment? Cover my butt.
There's no online public comment.
Okay, thank you. John, thank you for the presentation. Appreciate it. And Robert, thank you for being on to answer questions.
You're welcome. Thank you.
If I may, Madam Chair?
Yes.
Yeah, I would also just like to thank everybody who, at the Auditor Controller's Office, OES, obviously, John and your team, Admin and Public Works. This has been a lot of hard work over the years, but everyone's been working well as a team to bring this item to you, and you will continue to see regular updates. But I just want to say thanks, everybody.
This is an informational item, so we're going to move on to item number 20, which is an informational item. Clerk, can you please read?
Item 20, informational planning. Receive a presentation on the 2021 Housing Element Annual Report to the California Department of Housing and Community Development.
Good morning, everyone. Gina Cathan, County Planning. Just a short introduction, and then we'll get into the presentation. So, pursuant to California Government Code, every county must prepare an annual report on the status of its general plan housing element, which includes a description of implementation progress and reporting on the prior calendar year's activities. The annual report is prepared on forms that are provided to us from the State California Department of Housing and Community Development, and the report is actually due every year, April 1st, which has been included as an attachment in your agenda item. Failure to submit the annual housing report may make our jurisdiction ineligible for certain grant funds, such as community development block grants, emphasizing the importance of this report. This meeting is intended to fulfill the California Government Code requirements that an annual housing report be provided to the legislative body, which is you, and at an annual public meeting where the members of the public have an opportunity to provide oral and testimony as well as written comments. To my knowledge, we have not received any written comments, so we'll see if we end up with oral testimony. With that, I would like to introduce to you Lee Kimball. She is our county's housing programs manager and was appointed in part to implement and update the county housing element. She has prepared for you an overview of the implementation progress made over the past year, including the annual housing report to the state. So Lee?
Good morning. So we're going to go through the PowerPoint presentation on this year's annual report on our housing element. I want to first orient you to what we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about what the housing element is, what the annual report for the housing element is, why it's important to do an annual report, and how that annual report informs how we move forward with housing in our county. So the housing element is part of the county's general plan. It's state mandated document for housing. It assesses our housing needs based on data. It determines objectives that we want to accomplish to meet our community's housing needs. And for this plan, it's an 8-year plan that started in 2019, and it will go through 2027, so we're in our 3rd year. It's required to be state certified by the California Department of Housing and Community Development. The housing element annual report is a progress report on that 8-year plan. We look at our objectives to see how we're doing. It provides both quantitative and qualitative data for review. It demonstrates our successes and challenges we're facing to progress on our plan. It's required by law, and then it's submitted after it goes through this process to both HCD and now the governor's office as well. Why is an annual report important? Well, we need to look at trends to see if we're meeting our goals and what's in the way. We need to prioritize the objectives that haven't been accomplished or in progress to see if we have limited staffing or capacity or funding, which ones need to go first based on need. It puts us in compliance with the state, which allows us to go forward with additional funding to accomplish housing goals. It provides an opportunity for public awareness on what we're doing in housing and to give us input. And so how does the annual report inform us? It's a really ugly spreadsheet, so we're going to summarize it here for you. It looks at housing production data on several Excel spreadsheet tables. It also looks at housing inventory data. And then the last part is it looks at our housing programs and gives updates on those. Many of our programs are aligned with the objectives. So in 2021, for our housing production, this is what we have. If you look at the yellow, you're seeing what happened this year for permits that were processed. And if you look at the blue, you're going to see the first 2 years. So it's been a very robust year with moving ahead. On those top 2 lines, you see the combination. The lines underneath demonstrate it by income level. If you look in the housing element, that when we set an objective of how many units we need to develop to keep up with the community's needs, it's based on income for what people can afford to pay for their housing. The housing element also has a thing called ARENA, which stands for Regional Housing Needs Allocation. This is a chart that combines the chart for the ARENA from the housing element with what productions actually happened. So you can see that overall, we determined in 8 years we needed to create almost 1,100 housing units over an 8-year period. And you can see the breakdown, the majority of them being for workforce in the above moderate area. Because of the robust year we've had, we're down to 890 left, which is going the right direction. That's very exciting. But that's only 18.8% of our goal, and we really should be at 37%. We're going the right direction, and we hope to continue to incentivize housing production to keep going that direction. In our housing inventory data, this is determined by the certificates of occupancy. That's projects completed where people are ready to move in. And you can see we had a great year in 2021, and in the years prior too, we've had good motion in the right direction. For our housing programs, the updates for our accomplishments in 2021 are going to follow new residential construction, affordable housing, special needs housing, equal opportunity housing, and existing housing. In new residential construction, our accomplishments in 21 included that we maintained an inventory of vacant and underutilized land. We initiated a comprehensive zoning and ordinance update. For affordable housing, our accomplishments in 2021 is that 22 permits were issued for manufactured housing, and we funded and are creating an ADU, or accessory dwelling unit, homeowners manual, and this will help local homeowners and landowners to consider and hopefully get permitted a second housing unit on their property. And we increased the number of housing vouchers that are available from 67 to 97. In our special needs housing, our accomplishments in 2021 is through the permanent local housing allocation. We received funding that we will, over 2022, develop and provide funding to make accessibility modifications available to folks who become disabled in their homes. We've also been funded to bring the Housing and Disability Advocacy Program. This allows people who become disabled and are applying for disability to receive some supported housing while they're going through the application process, and it prevents homelessness. In equal opportunity housing in 2021, we made sure all Calaveras County housing programs follow fair housing practices. In any housing program, outreach materials includes where to find legal and fair housing information. In our existing housing, for accomplishments in 2021, we received funding again through the permanent local housing allocation to provide a down payment assistance program for grants, and that will also be starting in 2022. And we increased funding for emergency and interim housing for individuals and families that are working towards their permanent housing stability. We did this through several programs in HUD, HCD, CDSS, that would be federal, state, social services state, and also California's new interagency on homelessness council. If you have any questions or comments, I would love it if you'd provide them to me. My name is Lee Kimball. I'm the Housing Programs Manager for Calaveras County, and there's my phone number and email. And if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Thank you, Lee. Is there any board questions or comments? Supervisor Stopper?
You brought up some of the steps we taken with providing more accessibility to ADU units and everything. I think, looking at our numbers here, we aren't hitting the low or super low at all for the most part. I mean, 18 out of 178 leaves us 160 more to go, and at that rate we're never going to hit that threshold. More thoughts, we sit here and we say we're supportive of people building affordable homes for the low end. At the same time, we aren't providing necessarily the incentives that help push those types of things forward. And we've discussed this before, but just a thought in the future as we're progressing. I think we need to have a broader discussion on what type of incentives, what we can do to help promote businesses towards building these type of homes so that we can meet these thresholds, because the state keeps repeating it. We're going to hold the counties accountable.
Thank you for that. I do want to say that the way that the housing element reports is based only on permitted. And for super low and low, we have, through our Health and Human Services Agency, created some landlord incentives. And what this allows us to do is to look at housing, for example, putting a person who has an empty bedroom into a home in a shared housing situation and developing those programs. That won't show up on these numbers. And so we're just starting to collect that data in addendum to this report next year, which would not be what's sent to the state, but would be to let you know the success we're having, not in creating additional units, but in capturing those that may be out there for aging seniors or disabled folks who may not be able to rent at the prices that houses are renting for now.
Supervisor Garamendi.
Thank you very much, and thank you, Lee, for the presentation, and Gina, as always, thank you for your work on this. As I've mentioned before, I have concerns about down payment assistance programs, particularly because they exist in many forms through organizations that we're already a part of. But that's not my question. What is what I'm finding is that we're having, we have people working on low-income housing a little bit, but I find very few programs working on workforce housing. People who, and I don't know what those levels are that you mentioned there, but certainly there's a lot of people in our community that have jobs and are working and cannot find a place to live. So I'd like to perhaps have a further conversation, maybe not this time, about what are we doing to make this happen. I know we have a partnership with Stanislaus Housing Authority. I'm not seeing, I know they own property, but I'm not seeing houses being built. So I want to find out why they're not building the houses, what it's going to take to motivate them. Maybe they're not the right partners if they're not able to get things done. But we got to stop talking about it and start building things. And so I'd like to have a further conversation with this board about what specifically we can do as a board policy-wise to get some of this housing built. And part of that would be, what are these levels so we could understand them? What is the role that the Housing Authority plays? I know that we had projects a couple years ago and land, and those didn't work out, but the land's still there. So what else are they doing? And what else can they do to do that? Because there's a lot of money running around for this stuff, and I want to see it go to work. So thank you for the presentation, and I think we have a lot more to talk about.
Great.
Supervisor Callaway.
Ms. Kimball, going after what Supervisor Garamendi said, what was the reaction of the developers that you've met with regarding building affordable housing, since there is funding to help them? What has been that outcome of that?
So we don't do research when it's only on the behalf of developers, when it's only something or funding that a private organization can go after. What we look at it is as a partnership. So when it's funding that only the county could go after and could help to enhance this, that's where we start our research. An example of this going on right now is REAP 2 is about to be released, and REAP 1, or Regional Early Action Planning, allowed us to look at the ADU project. REAP 2 is going to allow implementation funding, and so it would be looking at gathering up from utility districts and other developers what type of projects might be a match, so that when that application request is out there, we could partner with privately run or other publicly run organizations that will open up corridors to develop. And there is interest in that, but because we're limited staffing wise, we're focusing on where our partnership makes sense.
Any other question?
Yeah, but they're for Gina, so.
You want to go for Gina? You can ask them, yeah.
Gina, what is the impact of short-term rentals on the housing element? And like my colleagues have mentioned, for affordable housing for people who are working?
So, you know, we haven't yet done a study, so I can't give you any actual data, but logically speaking, you know, it obviously takes permanent housing out of our equation. So if we're allowing short-term vacation rentals, those are units or houses that could have been used for permanent housing that are now being used solely for the purpose of transient occupancy, which we all know is less than 30 days. So I would say it would have a significant impact. You know, we're hearing things from folks in the community that there's, you know, no places to live. And we're seeing an awful lot of interest in short-term vacation rentals through inquiries into this department, as well as business licenses being issued. You know, we've got a couple applications right now for bed and breakfasts, which are, you know, essentially the same thing. So ultimately, I would say it would probably have a pretty significant impact, but again, we have yet to do a study.
I have one more. Also, could you clarify for me the accessory dwelling unit rules versus the homeowner rules that have or have not allowed ADUs in the past?
Are you asking me if there are CC&Rs that prohibit accessory dwelling units?
I know they are.
Oh, okay.
They've been out there for years, but now with the change in the state laws regarding ADUs, how does that impact the CC&Rs that are in our existing subdivisions now?
Well, I think that would probably be a question for legal counsel. I would find it difficult to believe that CC&Rs, which are, you know, rules and further restrictions that the county doesn't enforce, could in fact, you know, override state law. But I know that, you know, county code allows them, the state allows them, and there's actually more and more, you know, there's new updated laws concerning ADUs, and now we've got junior ADUs, and there's all kinds of requirements that are allowing, you know, accessory dwelling units in to look, you know, one way or another. Again, I don't see that there's, I would find it difficult to believe that CC&Rs could further regulate something that the state says is mandated.
I'd be happy to look at that question specifically. As a county, we have no ability to force a private homeowners association to alter their
Right.
CC&Rs. It would only be whether the new state legislation restricted CC&Rs. I'm not sure that it went that far, but I'd be happy to look into that further.
Well, because I'm getting it, since I have a lot of subdivisions, even though the parcels are generally small, is, well, the state says I can build an ADU, but my CC&Rs say that I can't. So can I go pull a building permit?
And there may be any number of things that are perfectly permissible under state law in general or county code, which nonetheless CCNRs restrict. And that's generally just fine, right? It's basically a contract that you enter into when you choose to buy within that development. But I'm happy to look specifically at the question of whether the state legislation, the relatively new state legislation on ADUs somehow tries to tie the hands of HOAs and CCNRs.
I mean, I'd appreciate it if it's okay with the board, because it's becoming a more frequent question. Thank you.
Yes.
I have a couple questions. If there's affordable housing or low-income housing built in Angels within the city limits, do we take credit for any of that, the county's general plan?
The housing element it has information regarding Angels, but these RENAs or the housing units we need to develop is only for the unincorporated areas, and that's the jurisdiction of our housing element.
Yeah. I knew that, but I had to ask the question because Habitat for Humanity has a big project going on in the city right now where 107 properties will be built for low income or workforce. And it's a very big project for Calaveras and for Angels Camp. So that is happening. I'm sure you guys are aware of it. And they got a grant for that. And hopefully it's very, very successful. It will allow at least homes for the working poor and low income.
Okay, any other questions? The other question I have, we have workforce housing, that's an issue, but also transitional housing for DV. And what is the county doing with that type of traditional housing to provide to those individuals? I know that recently there was one that was a place in Angels at the same time as Habitat, and then there was another potential project, not only for workforce, but also to accommodate these individuals that are trying to get a roof over their head with their kids.
Yeah, and you're asking about domestic violence, correct? People who are fleeing domestic violence?
Yes.
Okay. So Health and Human Services for the county has several programs. They're very specific in what they offer. So what our housing program services does is it provides oftentimes the place, but in partnership with those that provide the services. For example, with domestic violence, the person fleeing that needs maybe behavioral health supports and some other supports. There might be criminal justice. And so we work with them. In our community, the Resource Connection has a shelter for this as well as the services. And we might provide backup if they're full, but we normally will do a referral to them so that the person has wrapped around them what they need to get beyond the thing that is causing their housing to be unstable. This can be for all kinds of situations that we're looking at, not just domestic violence, where the house is a symptom of other things going on, and we're through our partnerships connecting the sheltering when a person is in transition to getting stable. We provide a housing case manager to help them look at what it takes to be a great tenant, and we have a locator now that can help with finding a permanent place. But if you don't take care of those other issues, they won't stay stable for long. And so we're just building a wonderful network of partnership.
Thank you. My next question is how, I know this is Gina out of planning, but how did this work hand in hand with building department as well to work on what are the incentives, how do we encourage these build out to meet the housing element? Because it's more than just the planning and where the land and homes are, it's also the cost associated with it and the incentive I mentioned before, incentives.
Lee?
Yes. Okay, so if you look in the housing element at the very end, there's like 34 objectives. And they cover a whole lot of territory from health and human service programs to zoning changes and just about everything in between, environmentally sound housing and all of that. And so we're given 8 years to make progress on each of these objectives towards that. The state, because we're putting our report in and showing progress, will have funding available. And then we can bring opportunities to you as they come up that make sense to meet those objectives, incentivizing development and helping to streamline systems that we'll go through, as well as looking at socioeconomic discrepancies where we want to go, well, what will we do for very low income households? What would make sense and will fit with our community? So as we turn in these reports and as we show we're making progress on each of those objectives, we have an opportunity to apply for funding with specific eligible activities to address even more.
I guess more to what I'm getting to is how do we incentivize the contractors so we're not waiting on state funds? How do we work? How are we encouraging them to help us as well? I mean, we can wait on the state funding all we want, but it never gets anywhere. So how do we take more of that ownership and work without catering to that, how do we incentivize our local builders to do this?
So if you look at the permits that went through, they look incentivized in the moderate and above moderate, and that's because the profit margin is bigger. If you're looking at how to incentivize people to build or organizations to build in the lower income where there's not a profit margin or as big a profit margin, this is where I think we pursue relationships with nonprofit developers, such as Stanislaus Housing, but there are others that focus on rural areas and coordinate with them with that state funding so that they can put in housing that meets those areas that we're not meeting right now.
But with the nonprofit developers, when they have a larger project elsewhere, are they in a place to work in partnering with the county? And that's another concern. Supervisor Tofinelli mentioned before, there's a massive project already happening with Habitat. So, is there even necessarily an appetite to work on that? And obviously we can't answer for them, but the answer, if it's not in that favor, what other options do we have? And I feel like we're shortening ourselves and not looking at more internal options that could be more incentivized. And
Yeah, so perhaps these are discussions that we need to further also include our, chief building official, our new planning director when the time comes, as well as Lee and you. These are really good, discussions if we can, put our heads together and figure out how to move forward and find these incentives, but I don't think this is something that we can necessarily sit in here and try to answer today. I think these are things that we need to further discuss at some time in the near future.
And exactly the conversations, the progress report or the annual report is supposed to have as a result of it. If we look at where we're at and where we want to go, then these are the conversations that this annual evaluation should prompt. So right on track.
Right.
Supervisor Stopper.
Incentives, when I think of them, we look at our costs for our permit fees. We look at other issues that we can possibly circumvent, like with our Title 25 issues. You know, working and collaborating with other entities in our, I'll use San Andreas as an example. Sorry, Mr. Toffanelli, but you know, more often than not, there's a lot of red tape when it comes to expansion, not because of what the county's doing, but more so because San Andreas Sanitary can't necessarily hold the new amounts of wastewater going into them. You know, and you know, this is something that's progressed in the past. These are exponentially holdups that could stop a apartment building that would provide for workforce housing or other things moving forward. And this is the larger scheme. It's not, doesn't come down to nonprofits. Nonprofits aren't going to solve our issue. You know, I mean, funding from the state's great, but that comes secondhand later. You know, free enterprise is our route to getting these things done and providing incentives to them and the ability to do it. And it doesn't just come from the county, it comes from our partners from across the county when it comes to infrastructure.
Ms. Von Lauder?
I just wanted to also advise the board that this is something that we are working on internally in terms of, we've got a meeting set for later this week, but to have that conversation between Health and Human Services, Economic Development, the Administrative Office, and think about where the delineation of the roles and responsibilities for certain types of housing initiatives lie, particularly the distinction between who the appropriate party is to interface with developers, for example, as opposed to nonprofit-based initiatives. So this is a conversation that we're having, and I just want to take this moment to let you know.
Thank you. I'm going to echo off of what Supervisor Stopper, infrastructure is the biggest thing, and being that that's an issue across the county with multiple jurisdictions, maybe that's part of the conversation that really needs to be is if these housing options cannot be built because of that, then maybe the step backwards is to how do we support the infrastructure to support these projects. You know, when I was on the city council, we had a moratorium and there was no building until we got the infrastructure built. And now that's why you see all these new opportunities happening, such as Habitat, because we took a step back, invested in the infrastructure in order to allow the housing. But the county doesn't have that luxury of owning the water, and we have to work, or the sewer, so we have to work with our partners to find a common ground to get that. And maybe that's what we need to have a hard conversation as well. Is that really the reality? And if it is, then this conversation needs to be different. Supervisor Callaway, did you have a?
No, I mean, the board at budget time we're the ones that approve the fees. We also have an ability, whether we take it from the general fund, is to offer incentives. We have that authority to do that now. And then maybe, like you said, or Supervisor Stopper said, is working with the utilities. But in terms of building fees or so forth, that's under our control. And if we choose to say we're going to not charge or charge less or whatever, we have that authority now to do that.
Yeah, and I really think that when the time comes to have those conversations, you really need to roll in Doug Oliver, our chief building official, and include him in those conversations.
Yeah. I just want to pile on because I think you guys are right on target. I think that if we keep waiting for the state to solve our housing problem, it's not going to happen. You know, we could talk at budget time about this down payment assistance program. We talked about the money before. Maybe it's one of those things that we could invest, find a creative way to invest to incentivize through our county to get these things going. I know that I'm working on a project and compliments to Public Works. They're trying and planning, working really hard to try to advocate to get things done. So I think there's a will there. We just have to figure out how to provide the tools to make these things happen. Where's the critical path that can break this thing loose, because it breaks my heart when I see these high-level houses getting built and the men and women who are working on them can't afford a house of their own in our community. I think that's a problem that we have, and we need to provide that middle level as well as a lower level house. The rich houses are always going to take care of themselves. It's everything else we need to think about. We should be measured by. Thank you.
Supervisor Stopper?
I was watching a documentary the other day, and, we hear California is supporting all these issues and moving forward, but we're one of the last states in the union when it comes to actually doing it. And we're talking about the critical issues of doing it. And there is one part they went over San Jose, and I believe that's in Santa Clara County. But San Jose, they'd set apart a high-density area, or it's usually homes, multi-million-dollar homes close to Silicon Valley. But they set a part aside and they rezoned it for high density, like 2 acres. They're going to put a lot of little smaller areas on it, and the people pushed back and said, "Not my backyard," and they were able to bring it to a vote and tell them, "No, you can't make that high density. We want to keep our community the same way." So, we have to be critical and think about which areas we're going to be putting these, let's say workforce housing when it comes to that, and how does it fit within our community and the overall picture. So it's going to take the building department, it's going to take planning, it's going to take our partners and everyone else working together, and Ms. Callaway. And us, yes, all of us.
Especially Maria.
Yeah,
Especially Maria.
Well, I think we need to take away the stigma of some of these words and lingo. I mean, workforce housing isn't necessarily, though, it's the guy next to you in the bar drinking a beer. It's the single mom working 2 jobs that trying to put a roof over her head. This isn't what we have created in our mind, a negative thing. So, I find it insulting when the public says that, "Not in my backyard," when it could be possibly your best friend, and now they're too scared to say that because you've just stigmatized them into a group that this is not what we're talking about. So I think we need to be really conscientious when we're talking about this going forward with any criticism we have from the public, that there's multiple layers to this, and we're lumping it into the worst case, and that's not the case right now. We're trying to get housing for the guy next to you, your best friend, the single mom with the kids. Any other comments or questions? Gina, Lee, thank you for your time. Appreciate having this discussion.
Thank you.
There will be more to come.
Okay.
Thank
Well,
you.
this is an informational item, so there's no vote. With that, we're going to move on to supervisory announcements, and I'm going to start to my left with Supervisor Callaway.
I'll be going to the chamber dinner this week, and of course, we have strategic plan on Friday.
Supervisor Garamendi?
I will be flying out in the morning to Salt Lake City as chair of the Golden State Connect Authority to meet with our business partners in Utah about making internet a public utility across rural California. And I think we've got a good partner there. And so it's pretty exciting. Hopefully shortly I'll be able to come back and tell you guys exactly what we're going to do as Golden State Connect Authority. But right now we're looking at breaking ground within a 12-month period. So
Wow.
pretty remarkably fast for government work. And we'll see how it goes.
That's awesome.
So I'll be back on Friday. I'll tell you how it went.
Great. Vice Chair Topanelli?
Yep.
Nothing to report? How would LAF go?
Yeah, well, we did have LAFCO last night. Marita was chair, and she tried to get this Zoom thing going, and we didn't get the meeting started till like 6:30, and we couldn't use it, so, but it went well. We had a discussion on the CSDs, continuing discussion from the board meeting, and we had a committee put together that I was volunteered onto, along with Anita Pack, to see if we could get all 9 CSDs together and have a joint union with them to when road repairs need to be done, we can have it all done in the 9 districts and get a better price than just one small district trying to get roads repaired or striped or whatever. If it's a larger project, we'd get a better price for it, but we need the cooperation with all 9 CSDs, and we will be putting out invitations for them to attend a meeting with us to have, at least have discussions on it, so.
That's great. Supervisor Stopper?
Nothing, Madam Chair.
Okay. I don't have anything to report, but I do have a question for my colleague. I am wondering if there is an appetite to send a letter to the state regarding the gas price increases, especially the impacts for public safety, and then especially in the rural area of traveling. We've got more territory or more land to cover, and I know MoDOT County Sheriff put a letter out. It doesn't have to be exact to that. I'm just using that as an example. If we would entertain sending to the state that they need to do something more with the gas, especially on local rural government.
I've already contacted Assemblymember Bigelow on it because my question was, what would be the impact to counties? We get our road money from gas tax. So if we say lower the taxes, what is the impact to cities or counties on the road money that we get? So if they stop the taxes, then we get less money for roads. So it's not just, for me, it sort of sounded good. Oh yeah, let's reduce the tax, but the impact to our road funds would be significant. So I did ask Assemblymember Bigelow that question. He hasn't responded yet because I thought that should be part of the equation. We say, yeah, do something because it impacts all our departments. It impacts us individually, but it also impacts the roads of Calaveras County.
It sounds like...
Oh, yes, and snow removal.
You need those plows, Marita.
It sounds like this might be something the board would like to have discussion about. Chair Fallendorf, would you like us to agendize it for the next meeting?
Well, I guess that's what I'm trying to, is there an appetite to have the conversation further than right now?
Yes, ma'am, I do have an appetite to discuss this further for a letter to the state, reducing the funds and then backfilling it with a state surplus.
Okay, why don't we bring it back? Okay, that's just one.
I'm happy to have that conversation.
Okay. Yes, please, bring it back to the next
Agenda
meeting.
as an item for the next meeting? Okay.
Thank you. Okay, thank you, everyone. And with that, have a good day.